Question is to the Minister of Health. Speaker, yesterday I tabled my private member's bill, the Safe and Healthy Communities Act, addressing gun violence. This bill will amend the Health Insurance Act, allowing insured services to include prescribed hospital and community-based violence intervention programs. This change will also allow trauma-informed counselling for victims and their families affected by gun violence through OHIP. Gun violence is a public health crisis, a crisis that leaves trauma ripping through families and communities and causes intergenerational pain. This year, in the midst of COVID, we have had the worst incidences of homicides in Ontario due to gun violence. In October alone, there have been 11 homicides, all of which are devastating to families and to people. Bill 60, Speaker, is about healing that trauma by providing a public health lens and approach to the trauma that is caused. So I'm asking this minister, will you support this bill by incorporating it into the work that you're doing right now?
Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the question. The member will know how seriously this side of the House takes private members' business. We will, of course, endeavour to review that bill like we do every bill, Mr. Speaker. But at the same time, the issue with guns and gangs is really a very important one that we have struggled with for a very long time. I know the government is making, the Solicitor General and the Premier are making significant investments in guns and gangs. I think over $180 million to tackle this, Mr. Speaker. But it is a multi-faceted approach. It has to include not only interventions on the ground with supports for our police. It has to include increased security at our borders. It does have to include community services and the work that the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions is doing, the work that the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing is doing to ensure that there is a continuum of care and outreach, Mr. Speaker. So I do appreciate the member's question, but as I said, we'll take a look and endeavour to review the bill.
Thank you. Supplementary question.
Speaker, back to the Minister of Health. This is not a problem that you can arrest your way out of. The former police chief of Toronto, Mark Saunders, said that, and I quote, Speaker, our communities are hurting. In my riding of Scarborough-Guildwood, there were 8 shootings in the month of November, 8 shootings. Last night I attended a roundtable in Scarborough with many mothers and members of my community who have been affected directly. They have lost their loved ones. Evelyn lost her son to gun violence. Tamisha lost her brother. And what they're looking for, Speaker, is not just one half of the solution in which the government just talked about. They're looking for a whole community solution and approach. A public health lens will allow the issue at its root to be healed, and that intergenerational trauma that is affecting the communities to be resolved. We know that we can't just rely on hospitals to stitch people up and put them back in the very same environment in which the injury occurred. So, Speaker, my question to this government, will they work with public health officials to create a community-based response to gun violence now?
Government House Leader.
Well, I agree, Mr. Speaker. That's why the task force and the significant funding that we put in place is a three-pronged approach for prevention, intervention, and enforcement. I think the member would agree that all 3 pillars are very important if we're going to tackle this once and for all, Mr. Speaker. But it is also important to recognize that a number of these guns are illegal guns which are making their way across the border. So we have to include that if we're talking about this. We have to include community services. I know that the Boys and Girls Club in her community does some very good work on outreach and early intervention, Mr. Speaker. It is a leading organization when it comes to outreach in her community. I'm very familiar with the Scarborough-Guildwood area and all of the important community services that are going on there. That's why we're making significant investments, Speaker. But I do appreciate that the honourable member, the focus of the honourable member's question. But as I said, we'll take a look at her private member's bill. A historic number of PMBs have passed under this government, and if it's a good bill, of course, we'll pass it.
The next question, the member for Ham.